Hi, everybody. We'll get started here. Welcome to class. Thanks for joining me. My name's Anna, and today we're going to be doing an all levels Pilates class. Oh, let's see. Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. We'll get started. So today I'm going to offer you guys some suggestions to level up and level down. Feel free to take them if you'd like. A couple easy ways to do that right off the bat. If you have any small weights, toning balls, heavy yoga blocks, maybe like cans of soup or the like triple ply giant rolls of toilet paper, you can hold on to those at any point. And I won't necessarily cue it for every single exercise, but if you want to grab any of your weight just to add a little bit of load, you're going to get a little more work in your shoulders and also a little more work in the abs. So it's a great option to grab. Do it when you want, set them down, take a break when you don't. Another option, if you have a yoga block or a ball, is to throw that in between your thighs at any point. If you want a little bit more connection through your inner thighs and low core, and things like shoulder bridge, roll up, legs together in your ab work. Again, great options. I'm going to teach this class propless. If you don't have any of those things, then you don't have to worry about it. And then just for comfort, if you typically use a cushion for your head when you're lying down, or if you know you have a lot of neck stuff going on, grabbing a small pillow or maybe a rolled up or folded towel can be really great. And know that you can set your head down at any point during ab work. Maybe take a child's pose, right? Just step out of an exercise, sip some water, and jump back in when you're ready. So just be listening to your body today. Listen to your breath. You don't need to do the strict Pilates breathing, but just kind of keep track and make sure that you can continually breathe throughout the workout. If you have any injuries, if you want to take those modifications right away without me cueing them, again, go for it. And if you have any questions on modifications or like some suggestions for variations, if you see something today that you haven't seen before, you're not sure what to do with it, then just feel free to shoot us an email and we'd be happy to assist you. So without further ado, we'll get started. We're gonna start standing and we'll make our way down towards the mat. So maybe you've just woken up or you've been sitting a little bit. So we'll kind of get grooving, just starting with a really easy spine twist. And I'm standing with my legs about hip distance apart. This doesn't have to be perfect just quite yet. We're just getting warmed up here. And just letting your torso swing really gently here. So not 100% yet, but just kind of noticing, maybe closing your eyes or keeping a gaze just gently in front of you and sort of seeing how the body's moving today. Where are the places that are feeling a little bit stiff? Maybe noticing where the breath is or isn't traveling. And if you want to bend the knees softly, kind of notice if the bum's wanting to tuck under right away. You could add a little pulse to it. And then if this is feeling good, you can start to expand your spine twist. So maybe adding the head and the eyes here, maybe sweeping the arms out a little bit bigger and starting to add a little more energy through your fingertips. And whatever speed feels good for you. Maybe this is your third workout today. You can get a little bit more wild with it. And extend through your limbs. You can make it really dancey or really floppy. And then start to decrease the spiral. I'm going to bring it back to that just lazy kind of bones shifting gently back and forth. And then we're going to start with a couple shoulder rolls here. So think about your scapula on your back as you roll your shoulders up and back. You're going to protract the shoulder blades, lift the shoulders up, and then retract as you lower back down. And arms can dangle if it feels good to bend the elbows to do this. Just a couple here, maybe you're pacing, maybe you're standing in one spot. Just notice again if the breath kind of slows down here and comes to a halt, and then reverse your circles the opposite direction. And if you're feeling any grinding or crunching, right, back off a little bit on the range and bring your mind's eye again back to those shoulder blades moving. So we're really bringing our mind's eye into the back space. And then let's take an alternating shoulder roll. So we'll keep that direction going forward. So it's kind of like a little swimming motion just with your shoulders. And you can let your thoracic spine really get involved here. So don't be afraid to move kind of outside of that really linear plane, to be so strict. And then you can go back the opposite way. I like to imagine if I had like a little kayaker in my ribs, my rib cage gets to kayak as my shoulders and scapula move. And then let's take a little flexion extension stretch. So I'm clasping my fingers. I'm gonna round my upper back and press away. So as much as I'm pressing forward with my palms, I'm rounding and pressing my thoracic spine back. And I'm coming to a nice neutral as I reach my arms overhead. And then a little extension. So maybe pulling the arms to the side or maybe to the back as I extend my chest up and lengthen back down. And again, let's try that. Maybe flipping your grip to the less natural wrist position here. And again, not overthinking too much about the form. So if you've got a wider stance or a narrower stance, just more moving with the breath. This is kind of you checking in with your body and taking some observations. Where is it feeling tight, right? Kind of the way our animals pendiculate in the morning when they're stretching. We get to do that too. So we're just doing a little research. Let's try one more here. Moving with the breath, kind of noticing already if it's starting to escape us. Nice. Then we're gonna take a couple easy knee bends here. So maybe bringing the legs a little bit wider than your hips and sitting back almost as if you're sitting in a chair. This can be a little baby squat, doesn't need to be super deep. Just thinking about maybe putting a little more weight into the heels and the outer edges of the feet so that the knees are tracking rather than falling in. And arms can be easy and swingy. You can keep them at your chest if you're like ready for more, right? This would be a great opportunity to add a little load, holding onto some weight. Just a couple more here. Pushing through the glutes, connecting with the breath, just getting a little warmer. The last one. All right, and then we're gonna step out to the side with the right leg. And I'm doing a little bit more of a stretch oriented variation of this. So you could have your legs slightly turned out or slightly parallel, but I'm just gonna pulse in and out of my right leg here. Getting a little stretch through that inner thigh. If you want more, right, you could go all the way down to the ground. Each time, you could even kind of hang out in this position for a couple breaths, still making sure that that knee is tracking over the toes. And then let's try just a couple on the other side. So again, finding that turn in or turn out based on what your body is calling for you to do. Right, and that's another big piece about connecting in with the breath is giving yourself an opportunity to listen to what your body is asking for rather than just kind of doing what you've planned on your body. A couple of variations here, breathing, noticing the difference from side to side. If you're a little tighter in one hip, can you keep that tailbone really reaching back? And a little bit of core engagement here just to protect the low spine. And then let's come back to center. Step your right leg back for a stretch. So I've got my heel connected to the ground. Wider stance will be a little bit more supportive. And I'm gonna reach my arms either behind my neck or maybe in front of my forehead. And I'm just gonna take a little side bend away from my back leg, come up through center, and then side bend the opposite direction. And if this is a little too much in the balance, you can just take it with your legs underneath your hips. And sort of notice here, that twist is happening in my thoracic spine. So my elbows aren't changing height here, but it's really my torso that's creating this side bend. And lots of energy through my heels to get my glutes active. Then you can turn towards your front leg and then maybe extend the arms out. Take a couple of breaths, spreading the fingers, and then dropping the arms, coming back and switching sides. So I've got my opposite calf back. If you're on the same leg as me, it'd be your left. But either way, switch sides here. And then we're gonna take that side bend, again in both directions. And just checking in with your breath. Noticing too, if you have a tendency to pop the ribs a lot, just think, easy melty through the front of the rib cage here. When we pop the ribs forward, we actually shorten the back space. So you end up getting a little bit less mobility through our trunk. And then once you've taken one more, evening yourself out here, you can come into that gentle little twist, maybe reaching the arms out, pressing the heel down, you get a little built-in calf stretch, and then dropping the arms. So now we'll come into a couple of standing roll downs. I'm gonna bring my feet a little closer underneath my hips, so I have to be really active through my inner thighs. With your hands either draping or dangling in front of you, or tracing your body here, you're gonna roll down one vertebrae at a time, as if you were stacked against an imaginary wall, and then bend the legs when you need to. Take a nice breath in here, relaxing the head, relaxing the jaw, and then pressing through the feet, dropping the tailbone down and rolling all the way back up to standing, maybe sweeping the arms overhead if that feels good. And we'll do that about 4 to 6 times here. So don't feel rushed. If you're moving slower than the pace that I'm demonstrating, feel free to go a little slower. If this feels really nice, you want to hang out here for a moment and take a little knee bend or a little shift of your hips from side to side, bending the legs each time to engage through the abdominals and the outer hips to roll back up. Right, we'll do this on the mat later, so you can kind of imagine how much core work this is when we changed our plane. And maybe if you're feeling more comfortable with this, you start to come up with a straight but active leg. So I'm gonna watch out for locking my knees back in this position and letting the bum reach behind the heels. So giving kind of a little bit of a heel lift just to give you a sense of how far forward you want your weight. And again, really active through the inner thighs here. Easy breath, relaxing the jaw, making sure that neck isn't gripping. And then we'll take one more and we're gonna walk out to a down dog on this next one. So nodding the chin, melting forward, really active through my inner thighs, making sure I'm not locking back and sending my hips behind me. We're gonna take a little walk out here. And then once you found your down dog position, if you wanna play with bending one knee, pressing the opposite heel down, getting a little bit more of a calf stretch here, see if you notice your shoulders climbing into your ears. Can you create a little bit of space between the ears and the shoulders? And maybe even shifting the hips and the heels to the right or left, adding a little twist. If it feels good to just stay and hold that down dog. And then once you've come to a steady down dog position, I'm gonna show 2 variations here. So version 1, I'm gonna bring my knees down into my tabletop position, and you can untuck your toes. You're just gonna shift back into a child's pose, and then using your outer hips and your abdominals, dragging with your arms, so a little bit of shoulder connection here, coming back into your tabletop position. So we're just getting a little more weight into the arms slowly. If you want a little more, find that down dog position again. We're gonna take this into an undulating plank. So I'm lifting my heels, scooping my abs, rolling forward, shoulders over, wrists if you need to make an adjustment in your measurement. And I'm actively pressing out of my arms, protracting through my scapula, and then I'm gonna roll back. So you've got those 2 variations, either coming through your plank, a little bit more load in your arms here, and then returning with that reverse undulation. So you can think about leading from your feet to your hands, still breathing here. And then I'm reaching through my upper back and returning to down dog. Let's try that 1 or 2 more times here. And play around with both versions if you'd like to try. And then our last one, we'll all meet up in our quadruped position here. So just give a little look at this. If your wrists are internally rotated, we're gonna be really overworking in the top and the fronts of the shoulders. So think about finding a neutral position or maybe even external rotation slightly in your wrists. And then find a couple scap isolations. So I'm letting my chest fall through my arms with straight elbows here. So I'm watching for the elbow wanting to bend. And then I'm pushing away. Now, while I'm doing this, nothing in my spine or pelvis is changing. So we really want to mobilize those shoulder blades. They tend to get really sticky and stuck to our rib cage. And once you've taken a couple like that, now let's take a couple pelvic curls. So we're just in a nice neutral in the upper body. I'm gonna use my abdominals rather than just squeezing my glutes. And I'm gonna curl my pelvis, so pubic bone towards my chest, keeping the upper body totally steady, so not quite a typical cat-cow here. And then I'm gonna lengthen my tailbone away back to neutral. I'm not going all the way into an arch, but I'm just finding a neutral position. Sure, it's a little hard to see, but my abs are engaged. And then try that again. So my abs are pulling, kind of the initial motion in your shoulder bridge and your half roll back and your roll up, and then lengthening away. So yeah, one more time. How's the breath? So you're getting a little bit of isometric shoulder work here too, right? Stabilizing, so noticing if your chest starts to fall through your arms. And now let's take this into a barrel roll. So for barrel roll, I'm gonna bring my head and hip towards each other. And then I'm gonna press away coming into my cat position, still using my abs and my shoulder stability as the leader here, to the other side, C curving, and then coming up through extension without sinking or dumping in the low back. So I'm really actively pressing away. And we'll take this a couple of times, and if it feels good and you're like, oh yeah, I know this one, you can get a little groovy with it. So maybe play with shifting the weight, noticing how the weight shifts from right and left side. Maybe playing with weighting more towards the legs or weighting more towards the arms. And then once you have vertigo and you're dizzy, breathe for a moment and go the other way. So reversing your circles. And you can go really slow here. What's nice about moving slowly and thoughtfully is you don't miss any moment, right? So instead of skipping past the part that's maybe a little weaker or the coordination isn't quite there, when we move a little more slowly and thoughtfully, we can build that connection. At the same time, flow state can be really nice. So moving without thinking too much about it. All right, when you're ready, last little piece, and then we'll get off the wrists here. Tucking the toes, find a nice neutral spine. We're just gonna hover the knees about 1 inch, 2 inches off the ground. And you're just gonna take a couple of breaths here. So shoulders should feel like they're definitely warming up a little bit since we've done some arm work already. If you feel them climbing towards your ears, you can slide your shoulder blades down your back and just pinch them a little bit towards your spine, right? We don't wanna over retract so the ribs are falling through or the abs are dumping. About one more breath here. Feel a little bit of quad work too, a nice toe stretch. And then set the knees down, press your ankles, and roll back onto your bum. So I'll take a little windshield wiper here. You can have your legs a little bit further than your hips, and then just let the knees fall from side to side. And this is a great one to just sort of notice how your rotation is looking from side to side. If you have one leg that can't quite externally or internally rotate as much, we're asymmetrical, but we're always working towards balance, right? So good research, good observation to make. And then bring your legs in front of you. You can have your feet flat on the ground or flexed. Flexing will get you a little bit higher on your sits bones. So if that's easier, great option here. I'm gonna take my hands behind my thighs. We're gonna play with that pelvic curl again. So I'm started upright, my tailbone's pointing down, my pubic bone is forward towards the front of my mat. I'm gonna roll back off my sits bones, rotating my tailbone now towards my feet and my pubic bone to the ceiling or to my chest, right? So there's that tip. If you think about if you had a compact mirror and it's facing towards the front, like your belly button or your pubic bone, it's gonna roll, that compact mirror shines up towards the ceiling, and now it starts to tip towards my chest. And then I'll roll forward again. So take a couple of those. We're just mobilizing the pelvis. If your thighs tend to grab, use your arms. So this work through my arms versus my hamstrings can help let the hip flexors turn off a little bit here. You can also keep your range a little smaller if you've got a band. This is also a great moment to use that band or ball in between your knees for just a little bit more support. So we're gonna take this into a couple rolls to come down onto the mat. If you're familiar with rolling like a ball, you can take that balance, and I'll show both variations. These can be kind of sloppy. So I'm just gonna roll. The idea is I'm not thumping on my back, but I'm taking that initial roll and I'm just gonna continue it back up to my feet. So the original position. So I've got that first initial pelvic curl, and I've got my hands supporting my legs, and I'm coming back up. And you can take these pretty vigorous. Maybe you don't ever quite touch back down, use a little more momentum. If you love rolling like a ball and you want that little teaser challenge for your abs here, most important piece again is that roll at the beginning. So take about 3 more here, just rolling up and down the spine. Little massage here. If you don't love this, play with just those static rollbacks, and then we'll all meet up on our backs. You can hug your legs into your chest. We'll carry them over to the right here, and then either arms in a T or bringing that top arm to support your thigh. We'll come into a little supine twist here. If it feels good, turn the neck. You can lower your head to the left. If that's not so great, maybe just keep it towards the ceiling and take a couple of breaths. And whatever position your opposite arm is calling for, to get a little bit more stretch through the shoulder, the pecs, the ribs. When you finish your last breath, you can sweep your arm overhead, bring your legs back to center, and then let them cross to the other side, right? Same options available here. If you notice that flexion doesn't feel good in this stretch for whatever reason, just lengthen the legs away, right? So if my legs are further from my hips, they're going to be, my low back is going to be an extension. And if my legs are above my hips, closer to my shoulders, I'm going to be in a little bit more flexion. So I'm going to play with those variations. We'll sweep that arm overhead here, and then come back onto our backs with our feet in line with our sits bones. So I'm going to take a couple shoulder bridge. You can have your arms down or up if you tend to tense through your neck and shoulders. And we're going to roll that same initiation through my pelvis, rolling all the way up into my shoulder bridge. Take a nice breath in, and then lay the spine one vertebrae at a time back down onto the mat. Now here we're going to work a little bit more posterior chain. So my abs are initiating, but I want to get my glutes and hamstrings to engage here too. Try to open the front creases of your hips. So watch for the ribs popping a little bit here. Sink through the sternum and the lower ribs, and then lengthening the spine back down, keeping both sides nice and even and long. And if you had car headlights on your hip bones, you want to have them shining the same direction. So if you notice one hip is tipping, you can take a little peek, or maybe bring your hands to your hips to give yourself a little tactile feedback. On the next one, let's reach our arms overhead for a little stretch. You can rest them on the ground and then lengthen and lower your spine all the way back down. And just notice again if there's any favoring from side to side. Sometimes our knees will follow by falling out, or the toes might want to lift. See if you can keep the whole sole of the foot planted. We'll take one more with the arms overhead for this nice little stretch. And then on the next one, you can bring your arms either back down to the ground, or you can reach them up towards the ceiling again for a little bit more of a challenge. We're gonna float the hips back up, checking in with the ribs and the abs. We're gonna go into an alternating march. So I'm stabilizing through my left glute, hamstring, and quad, and I'm gonna bring my right leg to tabletop. I'm gonna hold for a moment, then I'm gonna place that leg back down, stabilize through my right leg, and lift my left. So most supportive will be arms down by the side as you alternate here. If you want to kind of go in between, elbows are a great option. A little bit more challenge would be hands floating, and still more challenge, hovering by your ears. Right, so now I'm adding a little bit more challenge to my thoracic spine as well as my hips. And take about 4 more like this. Whatever variation, if you wanted to add a little load here, your toilet paper rolls, they're worth their weight in gold now. And then pause here. We're gonna make this a little spicier. So we're gonna lift a leg up, we're gonna step it out. We're gonna lift the opposite leg up. So we really wanna find this moment where we have to lift, and then we're gonna step out one more time on each side. You should be feeling significantly more hamstring at this point. Now walk it back in for 4 steps. I don't want to lose that structure that I already put in, right? So come back to your support side before you lift. Support side engages, then you lift. Supporting side engages, then we lift, and then come back in. Roll down. Whew. We're gonna do that one more time. So rolling it back up. If you wanna walk this out a little further, you can step out, again, nicely controlled. You can come all the way onto your heel with a slightly bent leg. We don't wanna go fully straight here. And then you can walk it back in. Nice and controlled. Last two here. Come back to your starting position. Hold for a moment, take a nice breath in, lift your heels, and then lower your spine all the way back down. So we're gonna come into some toe taps. We're gonna go into that imprint position. So I'm using my obliques to draw my abdominals together and lengthen my back towards the mat. Might not be totally flat, but I just wanna make sure that we're not overworking the bum to do this. So I'm gonna float one leg to tabletop. My test is, did my ribs pop, did my abs pop, or did my back pop away from the mat? So if everything stayed in the same position here, I can bring my second leg up to meet it. If not, maybe I'm gonna play with lowering and lifting and keeping that imprint position. I love an exhale with a lift. You can think about that exhale being the initiator to coordinate the whole team before you lift your leg. If that's feeling good, come into your toe tap position and alternate here. So this is more work on our abs because our leg is moving further away from our torso. So if you want a little more work still, just extend those legs further, just as long as it's not at the cost of your spinal and pelvic position. Maybe taking this into a slow bicycle. Remember, higher will be a little easier, lower will be a little more challenging. So keeping it slow, I'm talking so I'm not breathing for you, but exhaling at the initial moment of extension makes sense, right? As we exhale, the air decreases from inside our body. So now we can draw everything a little bit closer in our torso. Take about 4 more here, making sure you're nice and even. You've got all those same arm options as your hip roll. Last 2. Last 1. You can hug your legs into your chest, maybe pull the knees wide, give them a little squeeze, roll the ankles. Hopefully our core is getting a little warmer. We're gonna take this into a toe tap variation. So I'm coming into my imprint, I'm bringing my legs back into my tabletop position. I'm gonna curl up ever so slightly, just like tailbone off the mat, and then lower back to tabletop. Exhale to lift, and inhale to lower. Now what I wanna watch out for here is throwing the legs up, because we're thinking we're earning this with a strong exhale, low core, trying to curl that pubic bone towards our chest. And we also wanna watch out for the legs flinging away. So the hardest part really is this moment without letting the legs fall out of our control and then come into a bit of an arch in the low back. If this is feeling groovy, add a double toe tap. Or maybe a single toe tap, right? If you're working towards that double toe tap. Now, if you still want more, extend the legs. So now when I toe tap, I'm tapping a little bit further away from my bum. And arms can be anywhere, again, down by my side. Elbows, if you're working towards having the arms totally up. If you're glutton for punishment, maybe you bring your arms up towards your ears. Maybe you add those weights. And then if you still want more, straight legs. If you're gonna go straight legs, just make sure you're only hovering. And then resist the urge to throw the feet over the head. But think about really reaching up towards the ceiling. Let's take one more here. And then you can pull the legs in, give them a little squeeze. We're gonna lengthen our legs all the way towards the bottom of the mat, and we're gonna turn to the side. So whichever side you would like to start on. And I'm gonna either lengthen my arm down long, maybe bending my elbow so I can rest my head. Version 1, that bottom leg is gonna be bent for a little bit more support. Version 2, I'm gonna line myself up with either the back end or the front edge of the mat, make sure I'm nice and straight. Hips are forward, ribs and shoulders and head are forward too, so I'm not getting into a spiral. I'm really working my abs here. And then once you're in your preferred neck position, we're gonna reach that top leg back ever so slightly. So think about like a foot, 6 inches to a foot behind your supporting leg, and we're gonna lift and lower that leg. So you can point this foot, you can flex the foot. I think a flex or a relaxed foot is a really great option to play with. I want you to think rather than your shin leading, it's really happening from that outer hip here. So if you imagine where a swimsuit line is, the back pocket of a pair of jeans, this is kind of where we want to feel that lift happening rather than the shin. It's a little bit behind us, so that can challenge the low back. So really making sure if the ribs are wanting to splay, drawing those ribs down but without tucking the bum under. Sometimes those two things like to work together. So extend your tailbone down and keep the abs engaged. And it's light, shouldn't feel super bracy in your abs. Should feel like, I can breathe comfortably while I'm doing this. So next time you come up, we're gonna take some circles. Again, relaxed foot, maybe if you notice your shins wanting to do your glute work, or maybe a flex foot. If you love the point, do the point. As I'm circling here, I'm thinking about keeping my leg behind me. So this leg is never reaching in front of my supporting leg because I want to really work the back line here. Let's reverse those circles. If you're feeling really topsy-turvy, like you're spinning around a lot here, bring your hand down and that's going to give you a little bit more support. If you're like, this is great, maybe float that arm up. You can exhale in that moment that the leg is the furthest from your center. Now we'll just do a couple more here with breath. Last two, last one. Nice. The simplest ones are always like the spiciest, right? So I'm gonna flip around onto my belly here. Legs are easy. They're about hip shoulder distance. Go with kind of whatever natural rotation puts you in a good position in your low back. And then I'm gonna bring my hands by my ribs for a little kind of undulating cobra. So I've got a little activity through my legs, and maybe I even press down through the tops of my feet to kick my hamstrings and my glutes on. I'm gonna roll my shoulders up and back. So kind of like how we started standing, I'm thinking about my scapula drawing towards my spine. And then with my breath, and I love an inhale here, but play with whichever you prefer. I'm gonna expand my chest up and forward, and then exhale. And this should feel pretty natural with how your lungs fill. So that inhale kind of gives me a little bit of buoyancy. And I extend my chest forward and then lengthen back down. And I've got my abs on. And again, not so much that I'm tucking the bum under. I want my glutes on, but I want to be careful of that pinchy, grippy bum that can sometimes turn on here. So there should be a lot of work in my back line. Try about 2 to 4 more here. If you want a little more of a challenge, maybe you float the hands. Can be a fun little variation. Arms out in a T can be a significantly more challenging version, right? We're adding more load the further our hands are from our bodies. When you've taken your, however many you're ready to be done, press your hands back towards your ribs using your abs and your arms, and take a child's pose here. And knees can be together or apart, whatever feels better in your hip. And let's take a little side stretch in our child's pose. So we'll walk our hands over to the right side. You can either use the right hand by your right knee to press, to kind of reach and lengthen through that left side. Or if you want a little more passive version, just rest the head and reach the arms to the right. And on your next exhale, we'll try the other side. Again, you've got kind of those 2 variations, just reaching the arms out or bringing that left hand towards your left knee and pressing to create a little bit more of an active stretch. And notice if the head likes to grip here. You know, sometimes we're not always aware or maybe honest with relaxing the head in our child's pose. Can you really ungrip the hips and relax the forehead into the ground? Or turn the head to find a more comfortable angle if that's not great on your neck. And then carefully walking yourself back up, we're gonna switch to our other side. So again, that setup for our side leg work. Whatever feels most comfortable, this would be a great moment to grab your yoga block or a rolled up towel if your head isn't super comfy here. And then lengthening those legs. You've got those two versions, bent for a little more support, long for a little more challenge. Checking in to make sure your hips, ribs, shoulders are square so that your abs can help with this exercise. Reach that top leg back 6 inches to a foot, kind of what you can accommodate in your hips. And then floating the leg up, either relaxing that foot if you notice the shin, the lower leg likes to drive, or maybe playing with a flex and seeing if you can connect a little bit more through that posterior chain. And how's the breath? And you're gonna notice, because we're asymmetrical, right, one side might feel like you have to think about it a lot more to keep the organization. The other side might feel like you don't have to at all. You can just move without thinking. It's okay that the range is a little bit different. If this leg wants to turn out, right, we're gonna get a little more grippy here. So see if you can keep the leg parallel, or for some of us, it might almost feel turned in. And you can always take a little peek, maybe have a hand on the hip. I love tactile feedback. Sometimes just bringing that kind of into our nervous system of, okay, this is what should be moving this piece. Let's make your circles here. So as I'm circling, I'm trying not to let the body go with me. So I'm keeping my abs engaged, but not at the cost of tucking the bum under and gripping. And you always have your fingers here as a nice little support variation. Maybe arms up. Let's reverse our circle. And I'm trying to keep the circle in my back space, just to really get the outer hip. And have you found your side that's maybe more challenging? This is definitely my wiggly side. So we should do some extra, right? Go for 3, and 2, and 1. Nice. All right, well, I felt some outer hip. I hope that you did too. We're gonna take this into a little Superman. So doing that extension, but we're gonna change the arms a little bit, and we're gonna use our legs a little more actively. So for this one, I'm doing the same start. My arms are down by my side. My head can be towards the ground. I'm gonna find that retraction again. So just like kind of we rolled the shoulders up and back, now I just have more load because my arms are further back. If that feels like too much, just bring the arms closer to you. It'll be a little less work. I've got my abs on, legs are active here. Now I'm gonna float. So I've got those glutes nice and warmed up from the last exercise. You can point the toes, you can flex the feet, you can forget about them totally. If your knees are bending, it's a little more low hamstring. So see if you can keep the work happening from the upper fibers and your glutes, and then lower back down. And for this one, you can do the same breathing. So maybe inhaling and exhaling to lower, making it a little faster, a little more active. Maybe you inhale and go through, exhale and inhale again, and then exhale to lower down. So adding another breath. If you want more challenge, try floating the arms out. You've got your gold T, arms to the side. And maybe, if you want a little more excitement, you reach your arms forward. Yeah, and feel free to play around. Maybe you have enough energy to do a couple with the arms forward, and then gotta take a little break. We're gonna go for about 2 more here. So if you've been sitting a lot, this is a really great exercise to get that posterior chain really fired up. And once you feel satisfied with the amount that you've done, you can bring your hands again back by your ribs, pressing back, and take that child's pose, maybe flipping the palms towards the ceiling for a little extra stretch. If you want a little more, you could bring your hands to the top of your shoulders, bottom of your neck here, and then walk your elbows forward and let your armpits really open as you breathe. Sighs are a really great way to kind of calm down the nervous system. Sort of built-in natural anti-stress reliever. You can lengthen your arms if they're bent. Bring your hands back by your side, and then roll all the way up. So let's come back onto our bums here. I'm gonna take a little spine stretch forward. My legs are about shoulder distance or a little wider. It's kind of what's the most comfortable for you, and this position's not comfy for everybody. So if you wanna sit up on something or fold your mat, bend your knees, you're more than welcome to make those adjustments. So I'm gonna take my arms on my legs, whether they're bent or long, and I'm gonna roll down, same thing that we started with, standing. And then I'm gonna take a breath in at the bottom and exhale, scooping my abs, widening my sits bones, so I don't wanna tuck, like a giant zipper zipping up through my center. I'm gonna come back up into my stack. Couple options. Floating the arms. This can be a good variation if you don't quite feel the core here. Having to hold the load of your arms is gonna drive into the abs a little bit more. If you had something to press on, and you can do this with your arms forward or your arms on your legs, pressing and dragging your hands back up. Again, just to create a little bit more tension so you can close that chain to feel the core. And we're still thinking about articulation. This one's pretty challenging because we've gotten rid of the legs. So there's a little less space to move. Try one more here. And notice if in this very sort of simple choreographic exercise, but not always so simple to do, if the breath has gone out the window. And then rotate your chest towards one leg. I'm gonna do the left so you can see me. And then take that same roll down. So I'm rolling down. This time I'm adding a little twist. Easy breath in. And then exhaling to curl back up. If you want this to be more hamstring stretch, you could either open the legs a little more, or you can play with tipping the hips forward. So I'm kind of closing the distance between my torso and my leg versus more of my spine stretch variation where I'm staying pretty upright in my pelvis, but I'm trying to curl as if I was kind of avoiding a punch to the gut. And this you might feel more in your shoulder, ribs, spine. And let's try a couple on the other side here. So again, I've got my two variations where I'm rolling down. This is more of my spine stretch. I'm trying to stay upright in my sits bones as much as possible. And I'm getting a pretty good stretch through my thoracic, and this rotation can be really challenging. Or if I want more of my hamstring stretch, maybe I'm rolling down, but I'm letting my sits bones open. I'm letting myself roll forward through more of that hamstring stretch. And let's do two more here. If you hate seated upright exercises, we're so close to being done. And notice how the breath is too, right? Sometimes when we get into discomfort, we want to avoid it. Discomfort isn't necessarily bad. It's identifying when we're getting into, ooh, I'm pushing through pain, right? Which then we don't want to do. So bring your legs together. Yay, we're done with that moment. We're gonna come into a half roll back. So that same exercise that we started with at the beginning, we're gonna add a little more excitement. So if you wanna stick with hands on your thighs, rolling back, you're gonna take a nice breath in to challenge, and then exhale, ribs are gonna curl up first. So I'm just going a little further back now. Spine is nice and stacked, feet flexed if I need to sit up a little bit higher. I'm rolling back off my sits bones. I'm gonna go to where my arms are about straight. Breathe in and exhale to curl, to come back up. Now if you want, maybe hands forward. It's gonna provide a little more space so I can go a lot lower. It's also gonna provide more effort, right? If this is feeling good, maybe you play with arms a little bit higher. So as I'm bringing my arms up, I'm increasing that lever. This is a great one to add your weights to if you want a little more challenge. Ideally, the feet aren't coming up. I'm scooping, rolling back through my pelvis. Both sides of my hips are opening equally. So if I looked down, they're both flipped and unwrinkled. And then I'm gonna take this all the way into my full roll up. So if you're still supporting with the arms, you're gonna roll back. You can keep the legs bent for a little more support. Nod the chin and curl, holding onto those legs to come back up. If you're taking it all the way into your classic roll up, maybe you're extending the legs long, sweeping the arms overhead. Nice breath in, remembering to nod the chin before we lift, just to make sure the neck is in a good position. And if you want to play with legs together, you can get a little more inner thigh feedback. So if that's comfortable in your low back, that can be a really nice variation. If you've got a ball, a block, your strap at your feet. If you like to go for that nice stretch at the end, there are about 1 million variations, right? It's okay to play with a different one that isn't the one you typically do to mix it up a little bit. We're gonna take about 2 more here. Notice if the breath gets caught in that last little moment on the roll down, or kind of that most challenging moment in the pelvis. So I should be able to flip my hips all the way so my tailbone's down and my pubic bone's up before I set my head and shoulders down. And then for breath pattern here, inhaling and then exhaling through that little piece to connect your crunch to the full roll up. Let's do a little reverse tabletop. So I'm gonna have you bend your legs here and bring them a little bit wider than hip distance. You can have your fingers pointing towards you. That'll be kind of our most challenging, or gradually away will be the most supportive. So you can kind of play with your hand position here. And I'm going a little bit wider with my hands than my hips as well. Here I go back into that retraction and my chest is lifted. And I'm gonna use the same muscles I worked in my shoulder bridge. So I'm pressing up through my glutes and hamstrings, and I'm looking down, and I wanna make sure, again, my hips are pretty even and square and both sides of my torso are nice and long. And I'm gonna keep my gaze forward because I don't wanna be hanging in my neck here. When you're ready to come down, see if you can roll down with control rather than kind of flopping. You're gonna build more strength there. Let's try that one more time. So pressing up, and I'm really using my legs. And the more I can keep my knees stacked over my feet rather than here, I'm also gonna find I've got a little more work through my upper glutes and hamstrings versus just the lower, and a little less weight in my shoulders. Easy breath in. Then again, can you control that roll all the way back down? We're gonna come onto our elbows or forearms and do a little ab work here. So I'm gonna find that same position that you just found. It's a little bit smaller range of motion here, but my chest is lifted. Now I'm rotating my pelvis. So just like that roll back and the full roll up we did, I'm rotating my pelvis into a slight imprint. I'm gonna flow one leg to tabletop and then bring my second leg to meet it. So this is tricky. We'll find we wanna sink here so you can keep this extended. We're gonna come into a toe tap here. Now, if this is feeling groovy already, take it into your bicycle. The lower you go, the more challenge it will be. If you want to play with switching up your feet position, so instead of pointing my toes, maybe try flexing and seeing where that changes the work. Do you feel a little bit more glute, hamstring, inner thigh? How's the breath? Can you open your chest a little more, but keep the pelvis curled back? And then if you still want more, maybe taking this into your scissor. And for your scissor, just making sure that we're not rocking from side to side, but we're staying really steady through the center. So my low abdominals are really curling like mad. It's like the hardest part of your roll up, but we're gonna hold it the whole time. And noticing that your legs are not wiggling in and out here. I'm gonna go for about 4 and 3. Check in with your breaths. Last 2 and last 1. And rest. Nice. You can place your feet back down. We're gonna roll all the way back onto the mat. We're gonna come into a little one leg circle. So we'll start with the right leg. I'm gonna kind of show the first modification and then we'll move on. So bent on the supporting side will be the most supportive. Long will be a little more challenging. Extend your leg up towards the ceiling as long as you feel like you can keep a neutral pelvis. So as soon as you start tucking, just bend the knee a little bit and let it reach further away from your hips. The idea is we're just making a circle, and you can go towards and away, but the circle is really not about your foot. The circle is really about your thigh in your hip socket. So really keep your mind's eye on what's happening with this thigh right in the socket. And then if you want more, right, this is gonna give you more space. And obviously the straighter you make your leg, it's gonna be more challenging to control that range. So here's where your abs come in. Now you can move really slowly and keep that range pretty small, or you can move a little faster and keep it bigger. This moment my leg is the furthest from my center is probably where I'm gonna have my exhale. Let's try the other side. So we're reversing with the same leg. And ideally, it should feel like it is for sure hip flexor work. We do want strong and thoughtful hip flexors. We don't want tight and just kind of overbearing hip flexors. And then notice, how is the shifting in your torso? So maybe coming into a slight imprint to find a little more support, maybe hands on your torso to keep your spine and rib cage in alignment. And then let's bend that leg. Nicely done. We'll take that leg all the way across the body for another supine spine twist. So I'm letting that leg fall to the floor. If this is too much in the back, just bend that opposite leg for a little bit more support. And then all of those same options. If you would like to turn your head to the arm, or maybe bend the elbow for a little bit more of a pec stretch, maybe closing your eyes. You can use your opposing hand on your thigh to keep it heavy if you tend to want to grip in this stretch. And then let's sweep the arm all the way over. Again, bringing that leg back in, give it a little squeeze. Before we go to the other side, let's take a little active spine twist. So floating those legs into tabletop with a slight imprint to support. You can have your arms out to the sides or down by your hip. We're gonna go about 45 degrees to one side, using your abs and your inner thigh. Draw your legs through center, and then let your legs fall to the other side. If you want a little more here, you could just simply add your crunch position. So I'm isometrically holding in my upper abs as my legs are twisting from side to side. And if you want more still, right, you could extend the legs a little further from center. You could do that with your head down too, and you're still gonna get some good low core work. And we'll say, let's take about 4 more here in whatever variation you would like to play with. Last 2. And last 1. And then you can pull your legs into your chest, lengthen that right leg down, and we'll come into your leg circles on the other side. So your first version, maybe you're sticking with this one the whole time. Maybe you just want to start with this, finding that thigh falling into the hip socket, maybe extending the bottom leg long or your working leg long. And energy through that supporting side is going to be really helpful here, right? Our pelvis is connected. So if we feel like we're losing some stability, check in with that supporting side. Let's reverse this. If there's any clunking, any grinding, let's just not go into that range, right? It means something with the thigh and the hip socket aren't quite meshing. So maybe we need to work the range a little smaller. Maybe that leg is really wanting to turn out a lot. So kind of check out what's going on with the placement in this leg. And then again, a nice exhale. Hips are nice and long. Check in with that working hip trying to climb into your armpit. When you finish your last one, you can bend that leg in, pull it towards your chest, and then let it cross your body. And again, maybe taking that hand to your thigh, rotating if that feels good. If it's too much on the back, just bringing that bottom leg in. Closing the eyes for a moment. Take a couple breaths here. And kind of coming back to that observing. So we've done quite a few things where we do one side and then the other side, or we've done some posterior chain versus anterior chain. Just kind of taking all those things in so that you can kind of go through your toolbox and then you can address those imbalances with any like specific exercises or stretches. Just building that awareness. And then you can reach the arm overhead and then draw that leg back into your chest. You can keep that same leg there. Bend your right leg And then cross that left leg over for a figure 4 stretch. So for your figure 4, you can either keep your legs here, maybe gently pressing that thigh away, or if you'd like, you can thread the arms through, grabbing the underside of your thigh. Play with flexing or pointing the foot, right? Turning the head, maybe making little circles in your sacrum. How's the breath here? If you want a little more, you could cross your top thigh all the way over, like you're sitting cross-legged in a chair. And then you can pull either shins or ankles, or maybe that bottom leg towards you, and then try to press your tailbone away. So you can see my bum kind of naturally gets peeled up. So if I press my sits bones down, I'm gonna find that neutral pelvis and notice if that changes the stretch at all. Easy shoulders here. And then you can do a really dramatic fan kick to switch sides, right? Woo, or not. You can choose. And then reset for a moment here, checking in with the hips before you bring the legs up if you're going to. Kind of feel how even the torso is, where's the weight maybe wanting to lean. And then you can draw those legs towards your chest. And again, just kind of noticing, does the flexed foot engage a little more? Maybe you get more of a stretch or a pointed foot. If movement feels good from side to side. Check in with the breath. Check in with how this side feels differently or similarly to the first side. And if you liked that second variation, you can cross this leg all the way over. So my thighs are stacked. And then drawing those legs towards the chest. And again, check in with the shoulders. Press the tailbone away gently to lengthen the spine. It can change your stretch a little bit if you're working in a tucked pelvis or in a neutral pelvis. So something just to consider. Figure 4 can be really great seated for that reason. And then unwind your legs and just give your legs a little shake towards the ceiling. Maybe you want to take kind of a happy baby, feet together, knees wide, pull the knees, any kind of variation to finish that feels good here. When you're ready, we're going to take a couple rock and rolls. You can use your legs here again, kind of go back to that sloppy, sort of playful mentality where it's okay to not move totally linear and precisely. And then take one all the way to a seat. We'll cross your ankles and bring your hands forward. So coming into our quadruped position. We're gonna tuck the toes here and pike the hips, pressing back into that down dog that we started with. And it's been a moment since we've been on your hands. So if you wanna play with kind of shifting from side to side, placing the right and left palm down, or shifting in the feet, adding a little bend as you go walking your dog. And then slowly, with breath, walking your hands back towards your feet. So you're putting a little bit more weight into the legs. And then with either slightly bent knees, or if you want to rest your torso on your thighs, just let your head release for a moment. Maybe it's making gentle circles with your nose, shaking the head, no or yes, but really doing it in a gentle way here. So gravity's kind of taking the lead a little bit on that initial motion. And then we'll roll all the way up. So bend the legs if you haven't already. Scoop the abs, drop the tailbone down, and then just let the spine ragdoll. Arms can be really easy here. And then sweep those arms up to the ceiling, maybe looking up, and see if you can create as much space as possible between your ribs and your hips. So you're really growing tall. And then when you reach your arms out, see if you can keep that space in between your ribs and your hips. And try that one more time. So reaching the arms up, really reaching, creating so much space with your inhale. And then as you exhale and let your arms drop down, just noticing that you can keep that nice length in your torso. And I'll leave you guys with that today. Thank you so much for joining. Enjoy the beautiful sunshine that is out there. I'm excited to do that as well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us. We'd love to answer them. We have some classes, check it out this weekend, and probably some new stuff going up onto the online library. So if you missed a workout, you can check out the library and see and catch up. But so nice to have you all. Thank you so much for coming.